Hello and welcome to Help Yourself. I'm Tara Gentili, and Help Yourself is a weekly-ish live talk show about digital small business, the new economy, and the ins and outs of growing a company that you love. And this week, we've got a doozy of an episode for you. I'm super excited about our guest, who I will tell you about in just a moment. But our topic for this week is one that I get requests for constantly, which is how do you manage your time as a business owner? You know, how do you keep from feeling constantly pulled away from the stuff that matters? How do you keep from always underestimating how long it's going to take you to do your work? Who has that problem? I do. And, you know, how do you keep from never really making real progress on your to-do list? And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. And our guest for this topic could not be better because today I am joined by the founder of Productive Flourishing, the creator of Momentum Planners, the host of the Productive Flourishing podcast, and a coach and consultant for leaders who want to build high-performance teams. Today I am joined by none other than Charlie Gilkey. As you can see, Charlie, thank you so much for joining me.
Tara, I'm super pumped to be here. I've been looking forward to this jam for, I don't know, 2 months now? Was that when you reached out?
I think that's probably about when we reached out. Yeah, and I think this is also a great topic for this Eclipse Day. So happy Eclipse Day if you're in the United States. We are still in the towards the peak of it here. So if it's looking a little dark in my office right now, that's why. If you're listening to this on the podcast, just pretend, like maybe get a little squinty while you're watching it. It'll be the same. And speaking of the podcast, of course, Help Yourself, our entire archive is live on iTunes, on Google Play, on Radio Public, wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find our entire Help Yourself archive. So we do these shows on a weekly-ish basis. Mondays here at 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Pacific on Crowdcast and Facebook Live. But if you miss any episodes or you just want to go back and re-listen, check out that podcast stream. And at the same time, we would love for you to subscribe and rate and review us as well. Now, like I said, if you're watching us on Facebook Live, you can also hop over to Crowdcast so you can actually join in the conversation. I love to watch the chat and answer questions as we go through here, as we go through this every episode. And so if you want to get in on that, if you want to make your voice heard and just talk with the other people who are here watching today, all you have to do is come over to crowdcast.io/co-commercial. That's crowdcast.io/co-commercial. It's also linked on the live stream on Facebook there as well. So you can click on over and you won't miss a thing, and you'll get to join in the conversation. Whew. All right. Now that intro is out of the way, I want to dive right into this topic because I mean, there are so many different directions we could go with this. But Charlie, I want to just dive straight into what I think is going to be kind of mind-blowing for a lot of people, which is your productivity and time management experiment. So not only do you kind of think through how you're going to be most productive, how you need to plan things, but I know you're always kind of actively experimenting with how you may be able to actually be more productive. So can you tell us a little bit about how you got started with experimenting with your daily schedule?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it started in the very beginning that was just how I figured out, like, okay, I'll read 7 Habits, or I'll read Getting Things Done, or I'll read whatever productivity book du jour, right? And I'll read like, okay, that's really interesting. I'm going to try that and see if it works and see if it doesn't work, right? And so that was, from 10 years ago, that was the foundation of it. And I don't always talk about what experiment I'm running, but I'm always running some experiment or the other. Like, what happens when I don't do coaching at 3 o'clock and I just pull that out? Or what happens if I try to do it at 9 o'clock? Like last summer, I did a terrible experiment, right? Because it was one of those things that was a great idea on paper, right? And I was like, wait a second. If I flip-flopped my schedule and I did coaching at 9, 1, and 3, then I would have a larger block of time in the afternoon to do things. It was terrible, right? It was terrible. A few years ago, and this one was a really insightful one for me. A few years ago, I split my schedule up between what I called momentum weeks and coaching weeks, right?
Okay.
And so momentum weeks, I would just do creative work all week. And that's when I did my projects. That's when I did everything. And then coaching weeks, that's when I did all my interviews and all my coaching and everything like that. It looked great on paper. I hated it. I absolutely hated it. And it took me a long time to figure it out because I'm like, this sounds really great. Like, who wouldn't want a week just to do creative work, right? And have 2 weeks a month where you just focus on getting shit done, right? Well, turns out I didn't want that, right? And what I noticed is at the end of a coaching week, I was satisfied. I was happy. I felt like I'd actually done my job, right? I was just on a high at the end of my coaching week, right? And at the end of my momentum week, I was like Dostoevsky's man in Notes from Underground. I was pissy, I was reading existentialist philosophy, which is never a good place to go. I was just like really frustrated and angsty and mad. And I was like, what is going on? And I really figured out that throughout that experiment, I was getting so much positive feedback and so much real-time positive feedback. And I love doing stuff with people during the coaching weeks. And I was not getting that during the momentum week, right? And so the first 2 days of the momentum week were great. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, not so much, right? Because I was working on long-term projects that may or may not cash out for the next quarter or two, right? And then just like everyone else, I thought I would get further than I did. And then I didn't get there. And then I was pissed because I'm like, well, crap, I spent the whole week and that's all I got done, right? And so it was really one of those counterintuitive things for me that I only figured that out through the experimentation with what works. Now, it sounds super easy. Like, I'm just going to change my schedule to do this, but I'm a fully booked coach. So that means it took me like 2 months to get my schedule so that I could split things apart. And then when I figured out it wasn't working, it took me 2 months to get it right, like back again, right? And so when you play with your schedule, depending upon how you do that, like it has, long-term repercussions. And so they sound easy, like, oh yeah, just flip-flop. But no, it was like, 5 months of switching my schedule, trying it out for a few months, closer to like 7 now that I think about it. And then getting it reconfigured back to what actually worked better for me. And I figured out for me, it's the mix of interviews and coaching in the afternoon that was best for me. And then I had some morning time to really do what I most want to do. So I'm a half-day splitter that way. Other people need a full day. But the whole reason I'm saying this is like, you have to try these things, right? And you have to try them. And I've gotten used to the fact that like every time I try something new, I'm probably not going to like it at first, right? Because it's a new thing. It's like that new pair of jeans that you buy and you put them on, they look great at the store, but then they just rub in the wrong places and you don't like them until you break it in, right? And so I already know going into a new experiment, I'm probably not going to like this, right? It's change shock. It's going to be weird and awkward. I won't know what I'm doing. I won't know where things are, and that's okay. But I got to give it 3 or 4 weeks and then see what happens. Am I more productive? Am I happier? Am I making better decisions? Am I getting more sleep? Am I able to work out? Like, so those types of things which matter more. And so, yeah, I'm always like tweaking it. And the other thing that I want to say here is, if you are a small business owner, every 6 months to a year or 18 months, it's a different reality for you. Okay. And so what might have worked 3 years ago may not work now. And what might work now might not have worked 3 years ago, right? I've got a support team that can do a lot of things now that I didn't have before. And so there are different realities that I can live in now that I could not live in 3 years ago. And so the other reason I'm always experimenting is because my business is growing and my energy is changing. My priorities are shifting. The type of work that I do changes. And so there's always this lot of, is there a way to do what I'm currently doing better with the team that I have to get, more impact and more results? And so that's why there's always an experiment going on.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to get back to your actual experiments and like the one that you are running right now, because you and I talked about that on Friday, and I think everyone's going to find that fascinating. But I think you bring up a really interesting point right now, or right then, which is that I think a lot of small business owners think that time management and productivity and kind of getting things the way they want them is something that needs to get put off until the business is quote unquote working, right? Well, when I get to this point, then I can have the schedule that I want. Or when I get to this point, then I'll be able to focus on this, that, or the other thing. And it constantly gets, keeps getting put off because of the very fact that we're not working on time management. We're not working on actually managing ourselves within our days, within our weeks, within our quarters. For me, I know that's been a problem for the last 8 or 9 years as well. This year we decided that, so kind of, my experiments are not nearly as well structured as yours and intentional, Charlie, but what we ended up switching up my schedule this year to be is very similar to your kind of cut in the middle days, so that mornings are creative, afternoons and evenings are more kind of hands-on. Only mine is kind of half and half through the week. So Mondays and Tuesdays are off days where I can do strategy and writing and all of those things. Wednesdays and Thursdays are calls. I might be booked for calls from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. And that's fine, because I don't have to worry about the stuff that I got done on Mondays and Tuesdays. And then Friday is sort of that, like, all right, I'm going to not so much catch up, but I'm going to tie up all the loose ends from the week. And it ends up being this really satisfying flow to my week. And when it gets off, it's a little jarring, but I'm really, really loving it. So let's fill us in on exactly what your schedule looks like right now and why you're experimenting with the things you're experimenting with.
Okay, so I was explaining to Tara when we talked Friday that I'm currently on the hardest productivity experiment I've ever been on, right? And it's hard for unusual reasons. Now, everyone on this particular in this conversation is going to understand it. If you talk to people outside of this, they might not get it. So, few rules to this current experiment, but then I'll sort of back into the whole schedule thing. Few rules. One is done by 5. And by done, I mean no iPhone, no device, no computers. Most of the time I will actually shut my computers off for the day at 5. Done, right? 2 is working no more than 8 hours a day. That's the hard one. And then 3 is not doing admin in between meetings and interviews. That was one that I don't have a good batting record on, and I might have to say that one's the one I can't do. Now, the reason I'm doing that one is because due to a lot of things, we might go into it. I realized that I had gotten into the pattern to where 12 to 14 hours a day it was the norm, right? Mm-hmm. It was just a normal day was 12 to 14 hours. And I reached sometime in June where I wasn't to the place where I was burnt out, but I was well done, right? I was like, I'm getting close. And if you've ever been in that place before, it's not very far. Like it can be one of those quantum shifts day. Like one day you're burned out, you're well done. And the next day you woke up and you're done, right? You are just done. And so whenever I start feeling things like that, whether I'm sick or whether I'm tired or whether I'm just, feeling weird, it's just like I pretend as if I was burnt out. I pretend as if I was sick. I pretend as if, I was going through a traumatic experience at the time. And what would I do in those circumstances? Because a lot of times we try to soldier on, right? And we just try to that's not how I'm feeling. And we have a bunch of judgment about it. I'm like, you know what, screw all that. What would I do if I were there? And so back in June, I was like, okay, I got to take this seriously because 12 to 14 hours, that's the norm. And that's not sustainable. That's not how I want my life to be. And so that's how I backed into having to set pretty rigid rules. And that's one of the things about my productivity experiments is if I can't set up gamifiable rules on them, I haven't done the work, because then it's just going to turn into bad habits and things like that. And so that's why that hard stop at 5 is super important, because there had to be some time where it's like, you know what, it has to be realistic. And it has to be something to where I can look at the clock and say, oh, I'm going home. I work at home, but still, devices off, so on and so forth. So Monday and Fridays are much like yours. And so Monday is more like management day. This is unusual Monday that I'm doing an interview. But in the afternoon, I'll do some interviews. I'll do the monthly momentum call and things like that. But Monday is largely, I'm thinking, how do I get the team set up for the week? Now, honestly, that's one of those things I'm having to reevaluate, because we have a member on our team that's doing more of the team management. And so she's doing most of that on Monday. So now I'm figuring out what the hell do I do on Monday? Tuesday is more of where I think about sales and things like that. Wednesday, it's more of a creative day. Thursday is a priority coaching day. So I coach throughout Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. But Thursday, if I have a week that if I have some appointments where I just know I need to get them in, Thursday is the day. And then Friday is a flex day because I'm a speaker. And Friday and Monday need to be able to swap because I might be flying to New York or something. Like this weekend, Thursday, I'm flying to New York, and I'll be there Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And I've learned not to do the thing that, you know, entrepreneurs do, is not to go to a conference for the weekend and then assume that Monday it's just going to be a normal Monday and then burn the crap out of myself all week, right? I've learned to pull in these buffer days. So I'll come and on a Monday, I'll just be off or kind of tooling around, right? Because you got to build in those buffer days. And I think that's one of the things that we often don't think about is the things that we enjoy or like our creative work sometimes get a free pass. It's like, oh, I went to this weekend and I got to meet Tara and I saw Jaquette there and I got to do the talk and it was amazing. And then I'm just going to go into the week. And that's not really good for one's creative mojo, one's soul, and one's body. And so building in those buffer days is just one of those things you got to do. And that was the other thing that's a part of this new productivity experiment is within that 8 hours, creative work doesn't get a free ride like it used to. And that was one of the things when I was doing some audits earlier. It's like, why are my days so long? Like, I mean, I wake up, I'm an early riser. You know, I get up at 5:45 to 6:30 sort of naturally, do my morning routine, start writing. And so I might write from 7, you know, until 11 or 12. And then I'll jump on meetings and everything like that. It might be 5:30 or 6 in the old schedule. And I'm like, why is the day so long? Like, I've just done a few meetings today, but again, the creative work, that 4 or 5 hours of creative work, depending upon when I got up, that didn't get evaluated. That didn't get counted in the same way as other work time. But energetically, emotionally, mentally, it for damn sure counted, right? And so it's just one of those things where I had to get serious about that and say, you know what? It includes writing. It includes this, right? And so I have to adjust for that. And so that's why it's so hard, because when you've built your entire business, and I wanted to roll back to something that you said earlier about waiting on time management and thinking that someday your schedule will look different and you'll be able to do what you choose. When you have those assumptions like the one I had, where like creative work gets a free ride, it's what I want to do. I love writing. Turns out that has a cost, right? And so what it's done for my schedule is, again, working 8 hours has meant that I have to be super realistic about what I'm going to be able to get done. And I've had to learn to tell my team, like, nope, I can't do that for another 3 weeks. And it might be something like finish a blog post. I'm like, I start counting what I call focus blocks. And if you've ever heard me talk, right, it's a 90 to 120 minute focus block of time where you can actually get stuff done. You're not on Twitter. You're not on Facebook. You're not distracted. You're just focusing on that thing. I just count because I know that I have, with this schedule, at most one focus block. And I know what my projects are and I know what my priorities are. So they might ask me to do something like, it'll be 3 weeks until I get to that, because I just don't have an available focus block until then. And at first that was frustrating, right? Because I'm like, what? But at the second hand, I mean, as I've leaned into it more, it's actually pretty huge, because it's like, well, I either have to make a good choice about changing priorities or just accept there's only a certain amount I can get done. Because at 5 o'clock, I'm shutting shit off. Like, that's just what it is. At 5, I'm done. Win, lose, or draw. And so it's really been helpful in having that hard constraint. And I teach a lot about constraints and defaults, right? And so these constraints and these defaults really do help channel my creativity in a way that is much more realistic, and so on and so forth. The other downstream effect of my current schedule, did I talk to you about this, Tara? No, I didn't. Okay, so this is an important one. So because I'm a good delegator and workflow builder, every hour of work that I do spins off 2 or 3 hours for my team. Okay. So every hour I do something, 2 or 3 hours pops out for my team. Well, it turns out if I'm working 70 or 80 hours a week, and I'm working weekends and I'm working Sundays, like, and this used to happen all the time. I would work Saturday and Sunday, 6 or 7 hours, closer to 9. They'd show up to work Monday morning with like 30 hours of new shit to do on top of everything that they already had assigned to do. Right. And so they were never able to catch up, never able to catch up and get to the bottom of the to-do list. The other thing about it is time compression from a founder is super important, because if you're working that many hours, you're working 12 to 14 hours. Your team's only working 6 or 7 because that's the way we've set up our team. For every 2 or 3 days you've worked a full week longer than they have. Mm-hmm. And so they are always behind. And from your perspective, you're like, what the fuck? I assigned this like a week ago. And they're like, dude, it was 2 days ago. Like, chill, right? And so it's had this other really good downstream effect that team morale is better. They're able to stay on top of the things. They can actually like see what it might be like to get to the bottom of the to-do list. And that's been a really important thing for them. And so that's been that was the thing I hadn't accounted for, because I just didn't know until we did it for a few weeks. And of course I'm freaking out, because I'm like, there's no way I could do this on 8 hours a day. There's no way, right? Can't do it. Turns out you can. And it turns out it has these other downstream effects. Now, one of the things that has happened is I've had to get smarter about the way that I get help on email. And so a lot of the stuff that I was processing, and Tara, you know what I mean, like the little system stuff that comes in, the opportunities that come in, like, hey, this new like Slack changed this, or Medium is doing this, or whatever. I was the one filtering and sort of ferrying all that to the team. Now that they're sort of monitoring that, all of that sort of decision work and context work is on their side of things. And so I pulled my hours down, which helped them out, but part of that process has been scooting a little bit more their way, but it's still working out to be, I think, a net gain for them.
Yeah. So you just gave me a huge aha moment, because I have this exact same downstream problem, right? Because it's not so much, yes, I work more, but I also just work really fast. And so my 8-hour day might be someone else's 12-hour day. And I don't say that to brag, because I do not think that's not a quality. That's a problem. It's not always a good thing, because my team is always constantly playing catch up with me, and I don't want them to work as much as they do. And I keep wondering to myself, why are they still working so much when they don't need to show up for this thing? They don't need to show up for that thing. And when I say show up for that thing, what hit me when you were talking is they're showing up because I'm presenting something. They're showing up for the thing I'm giving them, even though I don't expect them to, but they don't know that. Because I have awesome team members, right? The natural response is to like, yes, I will take that now. Thank you. And I will go do something with it. But I don't want them to do that. So I need to stop doing that to them. So huge aha moment for me. The other thing I really hear you saying is so much of team management sounds like self-awareness. Actually being aware of the way you're spending your time, what the effects of the way you're spending your time is, when your energy is high, when your energy is low, when you need that sense of validation and the kind of the feedback loop when you don't, and just kind of cueing into that. Do you have any tips for people on how to build that level of self-awareness? I've heard you mention audits, constraints, defaults. What are some of the like really actionable things people could do to raise that sense of self-awareness around time?
Yeah, so I might be unusual for some of my productivity peers, in that I think 2 pillars of productivity are compassion and joy. Mm. And so if you realize that one way to think about it is I'm going to mirror back what you said, Tara. Would you expect someone else to follow the schedule that you're following? And if the answer is no, you got to make a change. Right? Because what you're doing is valuing someone else's well-being and someone else's sanity and someone else's energy more than you value your own. And that's going to be a problem. That's going to show up in all sorts of other ways. You're going to say yes to too many things, right? You're not going to be able to do your best work. So that's one of those ways. And that's why I say that's more the compassion side. Like, would you expect someone else to do this? And if not, you got to make a change. And the challenging thing is, again, some things you'll put into the mix would get a free ride. You're like, oh, if this person really loves what they're doing, I would totally like let them do that all day, except for if you think, wait a second, but it's also work, right? It's also work. So that's one piece. The second piece is really looking from a place of where you find joy and flow in your work. Because as entrepreneurs, the counterintuitive thing is, the more joyful and easeful that something is for you, the more you should charge for it. Right? We actually reverse it, right? We make the things that are hard for us and we try to charge more for them, right? But it's one of those counterintuitive things. And so if you're able to find those places of joy and flow in your work and really focus on those, then what you end up doing is creating this radically more profitable, smarter, more streamlined business, because every day is not the freaking struggle bus for everybody, right? And so as far as team management goes, one of the languages that we have around there is dread work. And I'll straight up ask my team, like, what's on your plate that's dread work for you? And it's not that we all get a free pass, because there's just some dread work that's a part of everything that we do. But what I try to do is, I call it smart sourcing more so than outsourcing. Try to find those bits of dread work that accrue in the team, and they go find the special kind of nut that loves to do that. Mm-hmm. Because our dread work becomes their joy work. And when people are doing things that they love and they feel that sense of flow and completion and things like that, it transforms your team's culture. So the reason I have to say that is, pay attention to your dread work, pay attention to your joy work, and do more of your joy work. And then figure out how to like get good relationships with people and understand that your dread work is somebody else's joy work. I mean, a lot of entrepreneurs don't understand this, but there are people who love to rock the crap out of a spreadsheet. They just love it, right? There are people who love like making copy look really good and making it present well on the website, right? There are people who actually love doing email support, right? And the other way I want to say this, and I know that your audience trends female, so I'm going to say this one as well. If you are holding on to all that dread work, you are preventing someone else from doing their joy work, mm-hmm. right? And you're making your business work harder and not as smart as it could. And so the reason I'm in this sort of space here is, pay attention to the things that you dread doing. Pay attention to the things that you find joy in doing. Pay attention to the things that deplete you. Pay attention to the things that nourish you. And for God's sake, take those seriously. I think so many people just like, oh, like, I don't like doing this, but you got to do it because that's just what you got to do. And I'm like, is that true? Like, it's not true. It's not true. And so the other thing that I'll say here is morning, afternoon, or evening practices, whichever works best for your sort of daily flow, are an absolute critical thing, because I think that's where you have the time to separate and say, okay, yes, here's what all I have to do today, or here's what all I've done today. But what was that experience like for me? Did I enjoy it? Did I not enjoy it? Am I resentful? Because, I mean, Terry, you'll know what I'm saying here. There are some times where you end up resenting the people that you work with, but you love those people and you love the work that you do. And you're like, what the hell is this resentment coming from? Well, overwork and busyness, so on and so forth, right? And so when you're really able to say, here was my experience of my work, and it's not the experience that I most wanted, or where's the space where I could find more joy? Where's the space where I could find more creativity? Where's the place where I could find more purpose and impact? And you just take a, like, okay, you take an approach of like, I'm not going to change everything all at once, but I'm going to optimize for that piece. I want my work to have more impact. What the hell does that mean? How would I cash out impact? Okay, X, Y, and Z. Now, what could I do in my business to get more of that? Okay, what would I need to do less of to do more of those things that I just identified I need to do? Okay, make a few tweaks and changes and see what happens, because you might end up like me in the Momentum Week and Coaching Week. I thought that was going to be a great way to optimize for deep creative work. It was not. I didn't know that until I did it. And so those are a few lenses I want people to really pay attention to. But again, you have to create that space to really check in with your experience of your work, and then have the courage to say, I am going to do something different in a way that makes me happier, that puts me into more flow, and the way that makes my days just not as bad. And as I've worked with hundreds of people on this, I've found that just a sociological observation, not going to go gender essentialist, but a sociological observation is that women have a harder time doing that than men do. And it's the way our society is, Tara, we can go along with it, but our society is set up so that men get to do what they want to do and women support them.
Yeah.
Right. And it's a messed up situation. And so we as, feminists and thinkers can think through that and say, okay, we're not going to continue that pattern, but we can't just shatter it all at once. We got to make these steps and learn what that feels like.
Yeah. Oh man, I love that. And, a lot of people are in the chat are echoing how much they love it as well. Andrea Jordan says, what is my joy work? Such a good question to ask yourself. Lou says, I feel guilty delegating my dread work. LOL. And we've got a couple of spreadsheet fans in the house too. So that's good. But I also wanted to call out to everyone that there's an episode of Profit Power Pursuit with Vanessa Van Edwards, where she talks about how to create happy teams, and job crafting is one of the things she talks about. And Charlie, it lines up exactly with what you're saying, which is just realizing, asking everyone, getting really clear, even, just a preview of the interview we did on Friday, you were saying about how if you got to wear 17 hats, at least you know which hats you're wearing. So all 17 hats might be different hats, but at least with your team members, if you can figure out which hats for them equal dread work and which hats for them equal joy work, and give them as many of those hats that equal joy work as possible. And then the same thing for yourself, because you want to treat yourself as good as you treat your team, please. Then everyone on your team can be happier. And just as you said, you can create a much stronger team culture that way as well. So I want to get into some of the questions, a couple of the questions that have come in from folks. And guys, if you're here live with us on the Crowdcast, there's a little button down on the lower left corner that says ask a question. If you've got a question for Charlie, you want us to discuss something, go into depth on something, maybe we kind of glossed over, let us know. But the first question comes to us from Kathy Goodwin. She says, what are a few examples of organizing one's day, week, or month? I've seen several guidelines, such as dividing the day into 4 45-minute pieces for list building, product development, etc., or 5 things I do every day, or 1 webinar a month, or 1 podcast each week. She says, since I value my non-business time, I'm always wondering what's enough, and would be curious to hear your take on it. Now, Charlie, I know that you've already offered kind of a few different ways that you've experimented with your time, but maybe we can take this question from the standpoint of like, what guidelines can people use to start creating these experiments themselves, and what guidelines can they use to answer that what's enough question? Because I think as business owners, that is such an important question.
Okay, I'm going to start with the latter question first and then go to the former.
Sure.
It's not a question, it's more of a mindset. So here's the thing about small business. You can never actually get ahead. Okay? You never can actually get ahead. So, but let's think about this. If you can't get ahead, then that means you're always going to be behind in a certain way. And so I think as soon as we really rethink things and say, you know what, getting behind and working enough, that's a really challenging construct, right? You do the best you can do with the time you have available. And that's what I really want people to think about, as opposed to enough or good or, getting ahead, because it's impossible in this entrepreneurial ecosystem that we're in. So when I'm teaching this, Tara, there's 2 things that I really like people to think of. One is the 4 kinds of blocks of time. I'll have a post up on the website in about 2 weeks about this, right? So there are 4 kinds of blocks. There are focus blocks, 90 to 120 minute blocks of time. I've already talked about those. There are social blocks, again, 90 to 120 minutes, where you're with people. Why 90, 120 minutes? Because there takes transition time to actually be with someone and be fully present. There are admin blocks. We've also mentioned those, 30 minutes to 1 hour blocks of time. Why 1 hour? Because most of us will want to jump off a bridge if we do much more admin than that at a given time. And then there are recovery blocks. These are the times where you're meditating, you're eating, you're exercising, so on and so forth. I've learned that I've had to be very intentional about saying recovery blocks, because left to our own devices, many of us thoughtful, creative folk, we treat our bodies like head transportation vehicles, right? Like its sole job is to get our head from one place to the next to do the next thing. But bodies are fuel. Your bodies are intelligent. Your bodies give you insight, and you have to treat it better than that. So, few other guidelines. Most people can't do more than 2 focus blocks or 2 service blocks at a time, or social blocks, excuse me, at a time without needing to recharge. If you do 4 or 5 focus blocks, like you go on that creative retreat, if you do that for 2 or 3 days in a row, you are going to be exhausted afterwards. It'd be like working out for an hour a day and then all of a sudden going for a 6 or 7 hour marathon for 3 days. Yes, you're going to be tired. Same type of thing. Last thing, focus blocks fuel your strategic progress. If you're not able to get your creative work done, you're not able to do those blog posts, you're not able to create those marketing materials, you're not able to create those offers or products or something, first place I'll look at with clients is how many focus blocks do you have? And when we do an audit, usually it's 0, right? Because their time is incoherently chopped throughout the day. Now, the person who asked the question mentioned 45 minutes at a time. The reason that I push more for 90 to 120 minute blocks of time is because when it comes to these deep work projects that I just mentioned, it takes a little bit to get into the pocket of creativity with it, to make some momentum, and then to sort of cycle out of that, right? And so what I've noticed with my clients and myself is that if I have 45 minutes to do some of that deep work stuff, I won't, because I know that I'm going to have to transition to something. I know that I won't quite make some progress, so on and so forth, unless I really, really, really chunk it down to like, I am just going to make the table of contents for my next book. That's all I'm doing, right? Then I might be able to get it down to 45 minutes, but probably not, right? Because it's going to bring up all sorts of different things. And so what I would like a lot of people to optimize for in our conversation is actually those focus blocks and carve them out, because again, those are where your strategic progress come from. Mm-hmm. No focus blocks, no strategic progress on things. And those are the ones that I have found people have the hardest time having the courage to claim and the discipline to use well, right? And so I've seen many people clear out a morning, feel guilty about it the entire morning and not actually get anything done, right? Or I've seen people do the same thing that I did with my whole momentum weeks. Like I finally have my 3 days of creative time. And then you're either tired and you sleep the first 2 days, or you're like, I actually don't know how to work in this amount of time. I don't know how to structure a chunk into a reason. Like, I don't know how to convert this book project into something like that's concrete and doable. And so screw it, I'm going to be on Facebook. Yeah. Right. So that's where that's the anchor point where I would want people to start, is just finding more focus blocks and learning to use them intelligently. Because it comes down to the fact that, like, if you realize that you can carve out a focus block or 2 a day, that gives you 10 a week, that gives you a 40 on a standard month. And you start thinking like, okay, a blog post to actually get that done requires me 2 focus blocks. I just know this because I've done it long enough. Well, that lets you know how many, what you can do in the context of everything else you might do. So, you know, if you're like, I want to post 3 times a week and it takes you 2 focus blocks to do that. Well, that's 6 focus blocks. You got 4 left for the week. What are you going to do with those 4? And are those 4 enough to do the other things that you need to do to power your business? And if not, you got to make some different choices. Maybe 3 times a week is not the right amount. Maybe it's once every other week, because that's the best that you can do with the time that you got available.
Yeah.
So that's where I would want people to start. Focus blocks.
Beautiful. I love it. I love it. I love it. I have a feeling that your answer to this question is going to be similar, but I want to go ahead and call it out. Amaka asks, what advice would you have for someone who still has a job and is building their business? So in other words, their schedule is super compact. She says, follow through is my issue. I like to work at night. What kind of advice do you have for people who are building businesses on a very compact schedule?
Discernment is the first place I'm going to start. Because, well, discernment and expectations. So I'll start with the second one. People working a part-time job, like in the position we are, they set their expectations for growth based off of people who are working full-time. Mm-hmm. And that's really a bridge to nowhere, except for like frustration and things like that. Realize that you are working on a quarter of the time. And I know that sounds obvious, except for when you do this for 6 months or 9 months, and you got a peer that's been working full time, And then they make a bunch of progress and you're like, what the hell am I doing wrong? Well, you're not doing anything wrong. They're just working 4 times as much as you are, right? They're going to have that much more progress. And so I really want people to be clear about their expectations about what they can do on their side hustle. The second thing is, I mentioned discernment. You don't have a lot of focus blocks to mess around. Like, you have to choose the things that are going to move the needle the most. And so if you're not sure that seeding the crap out of Instagram does anything for your business, stop. You don't have time for that, right? If you know that certain activities lead to leads or customers or whatever, you got to focus 80% of your time on theirs, because again, you do not have the luxury of being able to like screw off half your day on Facebook and Twitter and check an email. You got to get it done. The other thing that I would say here is communication, really clear communication with your partner, your family, and your community is super clear, because it's hard. It's really, really hard to say, you know what, I need 90 to 120 minutes of uninterrupted time so I can focus on this thing. That means you might have to negotiate around childcare. That means you might have to negotiate around chores. That means you might need to let your friends know that, hey, for the next 2 or 3 months, I might not be able to go for drinks after work because I'm going to be working on this thing. And being clear about that and okay about that is a super important thing. Now, what I will say about that is, along the way, you will find other people who get it. So I have plenty of entrepreneurial friends and creative friends where I might not talk to them for like 2 years because we're working on different projects, but it's not this type of thing where I'm frustrated or they're frustrated. Just like, that's the deal, right? Last thing that I'll say is pick morning, pick evening, create a routine around it, and steal time at lunch for admin. That's the way I had to do it as well. I stole a lot of time during lunch to do admin work in the beginning days of Productive Flourishing. And then I stole focus blocks in the morning. And so I'm an early riser, so that worked for me. If I was a later sort of scenario, I would have to work after dinner, which I find much harder. But there's something that I like to really challenge people to think about is, what do you love doing so much that you would get up at 4:30 in the morning to do it? Try, if you got a side hustle, try to find that thing and do it, because it makes it a whole hell of a lot easier to do some of these things. If it's just kind of ho-hum and it's kind of interesting, but you're not willing to fight for it, you're gonna be struggling. So I'm not saying it's got to be all passion. I'm just saying, like, if you're not doing that thing that you'll fight for, doing it in the context of the question, it's going to be really hard to make momentum, because life will always jump in and claim its time, and you got to work harder to reclaim yours.
Amen to that. Judy says, when I ask for that 90 to 120 minutes to focus, I offer to give the same focus time to the people I'm asking, spouse, partner, children, and schedule it. So again, just that really smart self-awareness about what you need to feel good about the time that you're stealing, as you might say, Charlie, or the team, the time that you're really optimizing for the work that needs to be done. All right. I want to be very mindful of the time since we're talking about time management, but I want to get one more question in today before we start wrapping up here, because I think it's a really good one. Daisy Chain Oddity says, I had a really bad day motivation-wise today. I didn't feel like doing anything. I think this happens to all of us from time to time, right? Which is why I wanted to bring it up. Any tips on how to overcome such a slump?
Yeah. Treat yourself like an employee that gets paid time off, right? And just claim it, right? If you need a mental health day, take a mental health day. If you need a sick day, take a sick day, and a for real sick day, not a like half-ass entrepreneur, like I'm going to be checking email. You know what I'm talking about, Tara.
I do. I took one of those the other week.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you were working for someone else, you would have a certain amount of leave days that would accrue, right? The thing about it is so many people start their business because of the supposed autonomy and freedom, and then never actually use it, right? Why, for instance, do people think that you've got to work on Friday? You don't. Work Sunday through Thursday if that works better for you. Like, you have a lot of autonomy. Oh, quick tip there. There have been a few of my clients that have been super frustrated about their business schedule. And they're like, well, Monday is when I start sales, and then my week is off to a start. And so I'm like, what are you doing on Sunday? And I'm like, well, nothing. I was like, so the start of your week is Sunday. Take that day to do all the things you're complaining about not being able to do, and then start, like, Monday is your second day, and you could roll right into it, right? So Yeah, I would say that that would be one place, is give yourself the space just to not perform and just no questions asked. You are human. We are these organic creatures in space and time, and just sometimes we don't have it. I was like that this morning with the whole eclipse thing going on and the weekend. I was just like, I'm trash this morning.
Yeah.
And I was okay with that. I was just like, I'm going to take a half day and not worry about it. Right. So that would be the first thing that I would say. Second thing is, find your ice cream. And here's what I mean about notice that we don't need like a big productivity system or a big discipline and accountability partner for eating ice cream or pie or whatever your thing is, right? It's like ice cream presents itself and it disappears. We don't need a 7-point checklist for that. And so when you are demotivated, unless you're on the side of clinical depression and things like that, which is a whole other thing, right? Find that thing that, again, is joyful for you. And it might not be quote unquote productive, right? It could be that you just need to spend 30 minutes playing guitar or knitting or chasing your kids around the house or whatever. But if you're trying to like mentally motivate yourself to be motivated, it's just this really challenging construct. And so I would say, don't try to motivate yourself. Find things that motivate you.
Ooh.
And then it works itself out.
Love it. I love it. I think there are a lot of people going for the ice cream right now. The literal ice cream, the actual ice cream. So Charlie, this has been an absolutely phenomenal conversation. Thank you so much for all of your insight on how we can become more self-aware around the ways we use time, how we can optimize the time that we have. And also just thank you for sharing kind of your on-the-go time management experiments as well. Can you let everyone know kind of what you're up to right now and where they can find out more about it?
Okay, so all roads lead back to productive flourishing. I don't do well with having multiple things going at once. And so if you want to follow up, and I want to throw out, Laura, thanks for linking to the 21 ways to quickly short circuit a funk post. There's also a 12 simple ways to be more present. That's for the last question. I write a lot about this stuff. I talk more than I write though. So you might want to follow along that way. What I'm working on right now is actually, I'm super excited. I'm working on a new book project. This is Tara. We didn't talk about it, but this, you'll get it. This is one of those book projects that found me as opposed to me finding it. And there's a different kind of magic when a book project finds you. And so that's really, really fun right now and experiencing a lot of flow, but looks like it's going to be traditionally published. So 3 years from now, we can have a conversation about it.
I'm going to schedule that interview now.
But it's really on the 5 keys to personal transformation, which sounds very self-helpy because it is self-helpy. But there are these things that I mentioned 2 of them today. So that's what I'm most excited about right now. I was telling Tara that, as your business matures, it's more like you do more of the same, right? You do more of the same. And so it's more of the podcast, more of blogging, more of writing, and more of showing up for things like this. That's what I'm excited about, is just being able to do more of that and it working really well.
Yeah. Thank you, Charlie. If you're still here with us live, please help me in thanking Charlie for all of his wisdom. And then we've just got one more thing, which is our usual boilerplate advertisement for Co-Commercial. Help Yourself is brought to you by Co-Commercial, your small business brain trust. And this month, we're kind of heading into September with a focus on management, managing yourself, managing your time, your systems, and managing your team if you have one. Because, you know, no small business owner starts a business to become a manager. And that's why I think probably most of us here, maybe Charlie accepted, is a reluctant manager. And so that's why on September 13th, Co-Commercial is hosting a virtual conference called The Reluctant Manager. And we're going to be joined by Lena West, Brianne Dick, Marie Poulin, Natasha Vorompiova, Lucas Lyons, to talk all about those things that we don't necessarily do as well as we'd like, which is managing yourself, your systems, your time, and your team. Even if you'd really rather not. So when you join Co-Commercial today and you start that free 30-day trial, your free trial is going to include free admission to that virtual conference. It'll be right here on Crowdcast. If you liked this kind of format, if you liked this kind of interview and getting to actually join in the conversation, the Reluctant Manager is going to be even better than that. So if you want all the info on that, all you have to do is go to cocommercial.co/manager. That's cocommercial.co/manager. Help Yourself is going to be off for the next couple of weeks. I'm going to Alaska next week, and then we've got Labor Day after that. It's going to be awesome. But then we'll be back talking about more management-y type topics and just getting your brain set to make sure that you are getting the most out of every minute of every day. As Charlie said, doing the best you can with the time that you have. Charlie Gilkey, productiveflourishing.com. Thank you again for all of your wisdom. Thank you all for being here, and we'll see you again for Help Yourself very soon. Bye-bye, everyone.